Welcome back to Hand Sewing with the HTA. In this episode we'll show you how to baste with fullness. Please take a look. So we have a length of cloth here that's 18 inches long, and I've marked back about 2 inches from the edge, and what we're going to show you is how to baste with fullness. Now in this example we're going to be using lining, but the same principle applies if you're basting in a sleeve, or you're basting shoulders, or you're basting lining onto the facing like you do in both the waistcoat, the coat, the trouser. We baste lining onto an edge as well. So we're just going to use the lining here. Now, good tip for when you're trying to baste lining on that is to give yourself a decent seam. Like the 3/8 is a sewing seam on the machine. You'd want about 3/4 when you're trying to baste an edge back like lining here. And whenever you're doing a shoulder or a sleeve, you're restricted by the seam allowance that's allowed there. What we're going to do is going to fold it there. I'm going to line it up there on that edge there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a mark on it here, and then we'll see how far that mark pulls in over that 18 inches, see how much fullness we're actually putting into it. So you want to take your, I'm using a size 1 needle here. It's easier for you to see a 1. It comes up easier on the camera. But you can decide whether you want to use a 1 or a 6 sharp. So you always want to have your thread length about the length of your arm. We'll place a knot into it and try and clear anything away that might get caught. And then we're going to start here at the end of our fabric and put our needle in. And then we're going to give her a back stitch like that, and that's just to hold that in place. Now to add fullness to it, what we do is we push a little bit of fullness forward with our finger, like that. And if you get little birds and like that, just take it out gently. And again, push some fullness in and baste it. Now the shorter you make the stitches, the more control you're going to have. If you try to do like a very long stitch, you're going to have less control. The longer the stitches, the more chance you can wave on that between. So you're more likely it can distort all the way down. And if it's distorting when you're basting it, it's going to be distorted when you fell it, because it's going to be very hard to keep that straight as you're felling it. So if you're not doing the felling yourself, somebody else is doing it after you. Take them into consideration as well. Like they can only make the work as nice and neat as you allow them to. You can put a stitch in every couple of stitches just to help anchor it, and then again keep pushing your fullness in. When we talk about fullness of that, a guide, and it is just a guide, it's 1/8 for every inch or so is approximately the fullness you're putting into it. And it's all about just getting the cloth and just pushing it in between each of the stitches. So in other words, lining or cloth or anything else, you're just the cloth, you're always adding to fullness to the layer on top, not on the bottom. The bottom lies flat, and then you just get it and you push the fullness into it. Coming all the way through here, again, I keep forgetting, but it should be putting in a back stitch every few stitches there. And again, it's about trying to keep the edge of the lining there lined up with the chalk line on the cloth there. The more you can't put in too much fullness, and then it becomes very difficult to sew out. So it's just about getting a little bit in with every stitch. So it's about pushing, just getting there, pushing it up. If it's not lifting for you, then just give it a little pull, lift it, push it in. Now we're getting close to the end here. You can see we've put in now over this 18 inches, with well over an inch in there. From start to finish. Now you can feel the fullness in there. You can see it as well. You can see all that gathering in it, and it is yeah, it's over an inch. Over an inch of fullness over this 18 inches, and that feels pretty good. So it does. So that's basting then with fullness. Now if you're doing it with cloth, like say if you're basting a sleeve into an armhole, you know, you'd be dealing with, you'd be sewing off a much narrower seam. You need the same, to keep the same amount of control. And it's generally, actually, to be fair, it would look a little bit more like this. If you turn this one around. So this would be like the armhole, and then this is your sleeve, and you've got your, most places, you've got some sort of inlay of that. So you're lining it up. You'll have a chalk line or a base line usually to follow when you're butting in fullness. And you know, for a sleeve, for the most part, for all the way around the sleeve, you're dealing with 3/8 seam. But in sleeves, like, even though it finishes at a 3/8 seam, you would normally baste off at about a 1/2 inch. The reason why you put baste off a 1/2 inch, when you go to sew the sleeve in, you take 3/8 off it, and you're not going to machine into your basting stitch. So that's the same idea again, as just you're putting in some fullness. When you're basting in sleeves, generally you go with a long baste first, like that. You're getting the fullness in. Now you're going to be showing whenever you're basting sleeves that you don't put fullness all the way around the armhole. It is it's concentrated in the sleeve cap and the undersleeve, but not up the front of the sleeve, the front side. And again, depending on how much control that you want, you know, if you're going generally go with a long baste first, and then you follow it up by a short baste to help redistribute the fullness. So if you're talking in, like, you know, stitch lengths of about 1 inch, maybe even 1.25 inches, and again trying to keep that consistent 3/8 back from the edge. So then you've got your, so let's say you've done the first row around. Now what I didn't do there was I didn't put any back stitches in. Just should have done every few inches put in a back stitch. And then you're told then, you know, you get to put in a shorter stitch. So when you're putting in a shorter stitch, what you're actually doing is you're basting, you know, between the other stitches there, like that, and you're distributing the fullness then between those smaller stitches. So you're putting in, it's like half the size of the stitch, or even a little bit less, and then you're distributing the fullness further between those smaller stitches. Again, don't be afraid to give it a back stitch every now and again to just to lock the fullness in place. There you go, that's basting with fullness. That's all we have time for in this lesson. Thank you for watching.